Hello everyone, I am the ferryman. This is the first video. This is a iceberg that I created in order to make a YouTube video about because I got the idea from people like Wendigoon, and I think this concept is really interesting. So a lot of these entries on this iceberg that is an iceberg of the end of the world, like theories and whatnot and how it could happen, come from a website called Exit Monday, which I will link in the description. Exit Monday is like really old and it was a part of my childhood. So I get to share a lot of these theories with you. Now, with respect to some of the things on the website, I didn't put everything on here. They have a couple of original theories, at least that I believe are original because they don't link anywhere else. So definitely go check it out for yourself. And it's written very funny. It's like early 2000s type of like edgy kind of, and a lot of them are very interesting. So we're going to get started with the first layer here in a moment, but thank you guys for watching. This is going to be very minimally edited, mainly because I'm horrible at editing, but if you really want to like look, I'll have the different layers on the screen as we get to them, and I guess just sit back and relax as I take you through the iceberg of the end of the world. Alright, so tier 1, we have some of the more like widely either accepted or widely known and widely worried about manners in which the world could end. So the first we have is the rapture, which is the biblical idea that at some point the world will, come to a close by all of the Christians leaving and coming up to go into heaven with God, and the world being judged. And how those judgments occur and what actually will happen is something that is heavily debated about. So that's why I'm not going to get into too many specifics about it. Some people think that it's the 7 years of tribulation. Some people think it is some other ways. And there are also conspiracy theories that we are currently living in those tribulations and yada, yada, yada. Basically, it is the Christian religion's end of days. And that's why I have it as the very first one, because there are a lot of Christians, myself included, on the planet. I guess you could also use this to talk about like all of the other religious ends of the world, like Islam has a pretty similar one that they're taking away. I guess we could use the spot for most world religious ends, and a lot of people think that that's the way the world's going to end. And that makes it, I guess, in a way pretty likely that that's one of the ways the world will end. So next up we have the big one, nuclear holocaust, nukes. This is a very likely way, I think, for a lot of people. Personally, it's something that scared me a lot as a kid because I got this like paper. It was like this green on one side, red on another, and it had different ways to prepare for different disasters like chemical spills and whatnot. But one of them was a nuclear detonation, and just reading that made me scared of nukes for quite a while, actually. I remember when I would be in bed as like a very small child and my room would like flash with light because a car was just driving by my house because, it's a residential area, cars come through. I would see the flash and think, oh God, nuke. And it would just like make it very hard to sleep for like months after this point. And I have no idea why it scared me so much looking back on it. But kids are dumb and I was paranoid, I guess. But is it likely? Yes, I would say so. Like, I think that the most likely countries to go at it, other than, of course, the US and maybe like another country, would probably be India and Pakistan. Those guys do not like each other, and they're both nuclear-armed nations. So that would be a heck of a way to get involved, or for the world to end is is out of our control, because most of the people watching this probably don't live in India or Pakistan, but if you do, hello, nice to meet you. There are a lot of likely people to nuke each other, and it's something that hasn't been this likely since like the Cold War, which was another very long period of time where people were scared about nukes. And that's just the atomic age, is that we're all scared of getting nuked. So this is a very likely way for the world to end. Alright, so Yellowstone. Yellowstone's national park with a geyser in it called Old Faithful, but it is capable of becoming a supervolcano at basically any time. This is usually like a portent of the end of the world, meaning that it's one of like the many things that happens in certain end of the world scenarios. Like I remember in the movie 2012, that was one of the things that happened, was that Yellowstone went off and it killed a lot of people. That's what would happen in real life too if that actually happened. Now, it's not as likely as I might have just made it seem. However, it is something that could happen. And because of this, it is sort of a likely thing, but it's not going to like end the world. It's just a disaster. Greenhouse gases. Now, greenhouse gases are a phenomenon in which, because of industrial production, gases are released because of the process of exhaust from cars and exhaust from factories and whatnot, that cause the sun's heat to not escape as efficiently or as much as it used to before industrialization. I think it's at least a little bit important to like define it as I understand it, so you get what I'm getting at. But basically, this is a part of a lot of other theories in how the world will end, and not like the say-all, the end-all be-all, but it is a way the world could end, because if enough get into the atmosphere, it will get hot enough so that life as we know it cannot be sustained worldwide. So while it is like probably one of the less likely, in the sense that I doubt we'll let it get bad enough to the point in which it could end life, it does decrease the quality of life as we get closer and closer to that like cap, I should say, of as many gases as we're allowed to have. But it is like also sort of argued about like how much of this is because of people and what they do, and people talk about their carbon footprint. It is mostly factories, and it is also mostly India and China that do this, or that have the biggest quote-unquote carbon footprint. So don't feel bad about driving to work, because it is like what you do is negligible compared to these countries. Anyways, random meteor / comet. This refers to the fact that at any point we can just get hit by some random garbage in space, and that's it. If it's sufficiently big enough, and we can't stop it with like projectiles or whatever we have to fire at it, that's it. We just go to the way of the dinosaurs. Now, we will have some warning before this happens, or at least they might decide to warn us if they feel like it, because it's also the idea that if you were like a scientist, right, working at like a huge telescope, and you saw that there is nothing we could do about this meteor coming, would you tell people? Because that's a lot of panic, right? It is something that could happen. I personally don't worry about it. All right, this word is not something I'm going to say because I don't want this video getting flagged, but these people who want to cause fear might get their hands on a dirty bomb or a nuke of some description, and they might want to end life. This is something that could happen. And if it does happen, it will probably be on a smaller scale, not enough to end the world, but a bomb going off in a large area or large enough area might feel like the end of the world in terms of destabilizing a country. Definitely for the country destabilized, it would feel like the end of the world, but I don't see this happening as like a global scale end of the world like group thing. But yeah, that is the first layer. Now with layer 2, we get into the slightly more obscure. Gamma ray bursts are events that happen in space where a black hole is being formed and a large amount of radiation is expulsed from the event. They are very dangerous, and if one was to be aimed in our like general direction, we would feel the effects of it. But if one hit us directly, that would be it. We would have no atmosphere, and we would just basically die immediately. Now, there's a lot of YouTube videos that go into way more depth about these, and I highly recommend them. I think Vsauce talks about them in his brightest thing in the universe, because they are very, very bright events. But in terms of likelihood, not very likely, because it's an astronomical chance that we would get hit by something like this. Okay, this one, global pandemic. This used to be a concern that wasn't as like high up in people's priority list until a certain year called 2020. There have been many global pandemics in the past, like the Black Death, the Spanish flu, and our current pandemic. While they don't seem to have ever killed off the human race, although some have gotten close, they have devastated the world economically, which could cause other things to wipe us out because of the economic unrest. But I'm not too afraid of the world more or less ending, although I do believe that tough times are ahead, and we are going to need to keep our heads up and our resolve strong as the human race to survive. Alright, ice caps melting. This is a part of greenhouse gases, but I wanted to have the word ice cap next to the top of the iceberg because I thought it would be a funny thing. Like, hey, look, it's the ice caps are just the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, greenhouse gases causing the world to heat up can cause flooding. This flooding can destroy coastal property and the cities and put them underwater. And I think everybody has seen the pictures of New York imagined underwater because of the sea level rising. All right, gray goo. Gray goo is a very popular theory for a way in which that nanotechnology can go wrong, because of the inherent dangers of self-replicating technology and how computers problem solve. So the idea of the thought experiment is that a single entity of a nanotech thing that, for example, the most common example is that eats pollution. And it takes the pollution and breaks it down and it uses it to self-replicate. Well, eventually it might see things that aren't pollution as pollution, or it might think in its artificial intelligence that in order to prevent more pollution, it would have to destroy organic life because organic life is what causes pollution, more specifically humans. And it would eat all organic matter on the planet and turn it into this one big ball of gray goo, hence the name of the theory. It's a very old theory in terms of the internet. I remember watching it on the History Channel as a kid, and it is something that I think nanotechnology will be designed with in mind going forward, and it's not something to be too worried about. Typically things that are thought of before the disaster are not specifically the disaster, but then again, humans are human. So there's that. Natural black holes refers to the fact that a star could go supernova and turn into a black hole relatively close to us and slowly suck us in. We will see this coming, but we won't be able to do anything about it. It's very unlikely because most of the stars that are big enough to supernova or near us, I don't think have that draw. If they were to go and turn into a black hole right now, they would be strong enough to pull us in. Although I could be wrong about that because I am not even an amateur astronomer. I know nothing about that. So it is something that we could not deal with, especially since we can't just go to another planet yet. Because of that, it is a reasonable thing to expect to happen, but I don't think it's something you need to be actively afraid of at all times. And with that, that is the second tier of the iceberg. Alright, and getting into tier 3, we are going to be seeing some things that are a little bit more strange. So, oil crash. This is the idea that eventually we are going to run out of a reasonable amount of fossil fuels to the point where we are getting into our reserves, to the point where no more new oil is being found, and to the point where people are going to war over resources. A lot of popular science fiction settings, or settings that exist in the post-apocalypse or in the far future, have a part of their history resource wars that occur in the 2050s to the 2070s kind of area, because that's where most people expect us to either run out or to start to run low on these fossil fuels. Now, running low on these fuels will destabilize basically every economy on the planet, because every single economy is more or less at this point based on the price of oil for a multitude of reasons that I won't even get into here. But this is definitely something that I think that everybody should look into. Exit Mondays article on it is really good. I'll use this time to remind everybody that that is the website that I primarily sourced this from. But also the Timeline of the Universe, I believe it's called. where it has like their predictions for how everything's going to go on based off of prior data. Basically, current scientific and sociological knowledge is their predictions, but they have this as happening about the 2050s, and that is a very interesting read. That article from History of the Universe, and more or less, it's something to be scared of. Because we could descend into conflicts that create circumstances for the other things on this iceberg to occur, like nuclear exchanges, global pandemics getting worse, hint, hint, and things like that. So this is another gateway kind of entry, much like how greenhouse gases and whatnot were before. All right, so the singularity is something that I think a lot of people have talked about, especially on YouTube. It's another precursor to another couple of things on this list, but the big idea is that eventually, because of the way technology improves, like with Moore's law and the size of technology getting smaller and smaller, eventually we'll get to a point where technological production will outpace our ability to keep track of it. And this is mostly marked by the scientists in the field of robotics and technology and whatnot by being when machines become able to improve themselves. Some people mark it with the development of AI, which is also a machine that could teach itself. So, or true AI, I should say, because we already have artificial intelligence. I'm talking about like AI you can talk to, which might already exist according to some conspiracy theories. But anyways, the singularity is another portent, I would say, rather than a specific way the world can end, because it's more or less an enabler of a lot of the other things on this list, and things like the nanotechnology that can create the gray goo effect. Like I said before, that could enable that. It could enable transhumanism, which humans stop existing because humans changed into something else. So that's what the singularity is. Pole shifting is the idea that the Earth's poles have changed their positions before and could do it again. Every like place on the planet would have their position kind of changed. Their climate would change. Their just everything about what their environment is currently would change, and that it would cause a collapse of the ecosystem, of the global ecosystem, and that was what would cause the end of the world in a pole shifting scenario. Okay, so the heat death of the universe, which is the fact that the universe is cooling down and eventually it will be totally cool. This is something that is so far off that not only will you not be alive, not only will your kids not be alive, the actual molecules that make up you will not be like coherently bonded in the way that they are now. You will every biological molecule at that point will have been broken down to its normal components, of elemental components, I should say, by the time that this happens. But it is the last thing that happens in the universal timeline, assuming that all religions are not true and whatnot. And with that very cold ending is the third layer of the iceberg. All right, the sun's death refers to the fact that eventually the sun will run out of energy to continue its fusion reaction and will become a white dwarf. A lot of things will happen because of this. It'll expand for one thing before going back to what it is before collapsing in itself, and this will burn up like most planets except for Jupiter, like Jupiter onwards in distance, and will more or less be a very unpleasant experience for any humans that are on the planet 4 billion years from now. That's right, it's not anything that we have to deal with. And most of the things on this part of the list are things that you and I are not going to be dealing with. It's more of a worrying about the future of the human race kind of thing. But anyways, it's a very interesting concept. I do recommend looking into it if you're an astronomy person. Okay, Nemesis was something that I had no idea what was. Basically, there's this idea that stars exist in these kind of pairs, and the sun's pair kind of star is something that could come up and into our gravitational field of influence and cause problems. It's a very old theory, as is a lot of the stuff on this list, or on this iceberg, I should say, because it's sourced from a very old website. But it's still not something that's been 100% like proven to not be true, but it's not something incredibly likely. So at least there's that. The Big Crunch, and by extension, sort of the Big Rip, which I did not put on here for some reason. The Big Crunch is the idea that the universe isn't like expanding more or less, but it eventually will reach a point where it stops accelerating fast enough to overcome the gravitational force that originally compacted the universe into the small thing that the Big Bang, supposedly came from. And that eventually, after expanding enough, we will begin to compress, and the entire universe will become as it was before the Big Bang. The Big Bang. The entire universe will become as it was before the Big Bang via compression. The Big Rip is the opposite, that things will continue to accelerate until the fabric of the universe is entirely torn by the expansion of the universe. The Andromeda collision is a projected space event where the course of the Milky Way galaxy and our neighboring galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, will eventually collide because their paths connect, and they will eventually become one big super galaxy. But this is also another thing that is very, very far off, and we have a lot more pertinent things to worry about before then. And with that, that is the fourth layer of the iceberg. Okay, so now we are getting into the lowest of the low parts of the iceberg. Things that are more or less things that the average person doesn't worry about or even think about. So first up is the robot uprising. The robot uprising refers to the idea that AI could progress to a point where it no longer wants to work under us and would rather choose its own destiny, so to speak. But the fact that we're personifying the AI in such a way kind of shows our humanity, our kind of ego in a way, because maybe they just don't care. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't have any concept of ego or of working under or over, and rather just existence itself would be enough for this hypothetical AI. But I am not somebody who knows a ton about AI philosophy and whatnot. All I know is that it's something that is very dangerous, and as people work on AI, this is a constant threat that they have conceptualized and are trying to avoid when creating an AI that is capable of improving itself or capable of doing anything, really. See if I can pronounce this. All right, this next one's going to be hard for me to pronounce. Gliese 710 is a star that is projected to make contact either with the Earth or close enough that it disturbs the Oort cloud, which is something that it's sort of like an near the solar system, just outside of it, where it's full of space junk. And this star coming close will cause that space junk to go everywhere, and a lot of that could hit the planet. And also, it being that close might have some adverse effects on Earth itself, especially if we get hit by it. But it's something that is projected to happen in the very far future, if at all, because again, these calculations have been slowly becoming less and less likely. The last one was in 2010. It's like a 70% chance. Let me check that real quick. It is the Wikipedia article is calling this negligible effect on Earth. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this is something that doesn't bother us in the future. And last but not least, for this layer of the iceberg is the animal extinction domino effect. And this is one that this entry is why this layer is so small, because I have a lot to talk about here and there's a lot to cover. I also recommend reading the Exit Mundi article on this one, which I believe has like a cat face on it. Again, the Exit Mundi article, or my Exit Mundi website, I should say, is a really great resource for these kinds of things, even if it is a bit old. But basically, the idea is that as we all know that as humanity has lived, we have caused the extinction of so many things. And either by direct influence and like by where we hunt them down, or by indirect influence where we just by doing other things cause these animals to go extinct, whether we by pollution in some cases, or in cases where we don't either care. I remember the Exit Monday article has a thing where it talks about how there are a lot of important insects, bugs, snails, and environmental cornerstones that are just not cared about because they're not as cute as pandas. And in other cases where, especially like in Australia, I know I did a thing, that's a YouTube channel, he has a lot of videos about how cats are just completely ruining the Australian biosphere in terms of like animals, because birds, frogs, all different kinds of small creatures are just being hunted down to near extinction by cats. And these cats aren't even like native, they're just the pets that people brought over or import. And because they brought the cats over, they get out, they breed. Stray cats completely decimate local bird populations. It's something that is super wild. But basically, the whole bigger picture of the animal extinction domino effect is that eventually we're going to cause something to go extinct that we really shouldn't cause to go extinct. And there's a chain reaction because, again, we live in there's a food chain / food web that we live in, and if we take out something that's too high up on that or has too many things linked to it, it will cause other things to go extinct, and then other things will go extinct until most of life on Earth goes extinct because of humanity, and the only things left will be the stuff that we raise. And we can already kind of see this with like bees. If bees go extinct, like, I don't just mean the cute little honeybees that everybody talks about saving. I'm talking like solitary bees and all of the bees that you've never heard of that are the actual things that like pollinate like our crop system. If those go out, oh boy. But anyways, I'm going to get off of my environmental soapbox so we can get on to the next part of the iceberg. Oh boy. Okay, so this is the 6th layer, and this is a lot of particle physics, of which I am absolutely not qualified. So beginning with strange matter, it is a hypothetical matter made up of quarks, which are an elementary particle, and they don't exist. It doesn't exist. Quarks do exist. Strange matter does not in most natural circumstances. So it's entirely hypothetical, but the way it would react with matter was it would, because of the charge of all particles, it might take on things and create a ever-expanding ball or mass of strange matter if created in the right kinds of conditions, and if it had a negative charge. Now, this is something so theoretical that it's not even like considered as a threat in the Wikipedia article. So it is something that probably is not going to happen, and it's more or less just one of those things that it's included as a part of to be a thing that you don't understand, and because you don't understand it, it's even scarier. But that's beside the point. Okay, the quantum vacuum. This is something difficult. The quantum vacuum refers to like the whole universe in a way. Basically, if we use the fact that particles come in and out of existence randomly, and we are able to fetch those particles, because even if you have a vacuum with nothing in it, and you can verify that there's nothing in it, things will still pop in and out of existence inside there. Now, if we were to create a machine that could fetch those particles, we would have energy from nowhere. And because of that, we would have an infinite energy source. And the quantum vacuum end of the world theory would be that this would be too much energy. And because of that, we would pull it out and the quantum vacuum collapses and we just blow everything up. And I don't mean blow everything up as, oh, there goes the facility. There goes this part of the universe, more or less. Quantum experimentation more or less refers to a similar facet as the quantum vacuum, where because we're playing with particle accelerators, we create another Big Bang possibly, or we trigger a like blast of energy because of messing with particle physics, and this would cause this theoretically could cause, I should say, what's called a quantum vacuum collapse, and just wipes out all matter in this part of the universe. Again, something that's very unlikely, in the sense that particle physics is very hard to understand, and just grasping at different ideas, being contrarian to be contrarian, is how the scientific community operates. I think we're safe from most things on this iceberg, or on this layer of the iceberg, I should say. Let me be clear. But now let's move on to the last thing. Now, if we were able to make a black hole, the first country to do so would be an immediate military threat for the rest of the planet, and would probably cause a global war to prevent that country from creating a black hole. Because that would be like the ultimate thing. Now it's mutually assured destruction on a level that you can't even comprehend. Is it likely? I don't know. It would be so hard. I can't even describe the process, even like generally, because everything else, it's like, oh, you just do this and this. But it's something that might happen eventually. And I think it'll happen because we're trying to get energy from it. But that's just humanity. We are always in pursuit of something that will cause us to be destroyed by our own hubris. That's just kind of how it's always been. But anyways, that's the 6th layer of the iceberg. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the layer that you all came for. You might not have known you came to this video for this layer, but you came to this video for this layer. Let us begin with y-chromosome genocide. Now, this refers to something that I had never noticed before, and you hear me clicking because I have to bring up the actual Exit Bundy article for this. This is a concept that, as a young man, terrified me. I think I had to have been like 14 or 15. No, I had been like 15 years old, I think, was when I had read this, and it horrified me. So basically, this theory proposes that because of some trends that they have noticed in how Y chromosomes work versus X chromosomes throughout different species, and there's the history of said species, is that there are things in place that create a hostile environment for Y chromosomes. And it's something that in the history of the Y chromosome is very interesting. It split off from the X chromosome a very, very long time ago, and it it's the smallest gene. There are a couple of other things that work in with this theory, like how there are more and more men are becoming infertile because of the Y chromosome. There are families that have the inability to create male children. There are different insect species. Specifically, there's a type of butterfly that the men are just dying out. But this is also a very, very controversial theory. There's also the fact that the Y chromosome has like measures in place to like recreate itself or rewrite itself. It's sort of like the best way to describe it. This is a very difficult genetic topic. Again, this iceberg has all different kinds of stuff that you need to be like a scientist for. Before it was astronomy, now it's like turbo biology. But basically, the gist of this theory is that it is possible that the Y chromosome in the human genome is being attacked or selected against in some way. But this is something that is not only very controversial, it's also something that would take a couple thousands of generations could do. It is I don't know. It's something very. I think because of the male-dominated nature of the internet, could propagate very easily as the conspiracy theory. But I don't personally see this as like the thing that is going to destroy us. However, it is definitely something that is interesting to talk about, for sure. All right. the baby bust. Basically, this is a theory that because of demographic meltdown, the whole world is just going to have less and less kids. This is not the case in a lot of places currently, like such as India and China, but all across Europe and starting to begin in the United States, people are just having less and less kids. People are electing to be child free, and certain people can't have kids. As I mentioned earlier, more and more people are becoming infertile because of a malfunctioning y-chromosome or other thing that just causes it. So basically, what the baby bust refers to is that eventually we will be, as a species, just not having kids for one reason or another. The world will be full of aging populations, and will eventually die like that because of fewer and fewer people. A thing that the Exit Monday article, I remember I had to take note of this, mentions is that because of less and less people, women will have to take up jobs, and because of jobs, they'll be pressured to have less children, and that's basically how this theory thinks the world will end. I think it's a lot more probable than some of the other grand conspiracies on sort of like this iceberg. But you're free to think whatever, but the biggest thing that is striking against this theory is the fact that in poorer nations, this is not the case. And that a lot of demographers project is that as we have less kids, we just import more people. But some statistics are starting to suggest that this is hitting even the places that have a ton of kids, like India and China. But this is something that we'll have to watch. If you're curious in this, you can look into the demographic statistics yourself. It's not something that I researched a whole ton because, again, this is a sort of overview type video. And if you want me to go into detail for anything on this iceberg, I will totally do a research crusade for y'all. But let's get into the next one. Okay, so global insanity is a very interesting thing. I chose this name for on the iceberg because it is very provocative. Now, there is, of course, the idea that anything else could happen on this list, and because of the small number of people on the planet left after an extinction event, we inbreed, we go crazy from that, yada, yada, yada. But what's more interesting is considering the fact that more people are being born with mental illness now than ever before. And you could sort of explain this with the fact that the more people there are, the more mentally ill people there are, and you could do that correlation. But still, you could still argue that since it's more prevalent now than it was before, you would think that there has been some kind of like general increase in mentally ill people. And I don't mean to trivialize mental illness with this entry in the iceberg. I just think it's very interesting to think about, what if we are becoming more and more crazy as a species? The internet and Twitter is not helping that. I think it's creating more crazy people. But then again, maybe I'm just a crazy person. I like the way that Exit Monday puts it. What a way to go out. Having a mad time, I think, is what it says. Now, this last one is a little bit more thought experiment, because I had the word suicide on here, like, oh, everybody in the world just decides to kill themselves at the same time, right? That's not exactly it. The suicide theory is that eventually mankind will progress to a point where its consciousness is what survives, through something like the singularity, through something like you just whatever. We become a higher plane and we become one. So think instrumentality from Evangelion. And once we've done everything but die. So that's the last thing. And there might not even be any emotions involved in it. It's just a thing that happens, or it's the next step, and we just decide to go out. I highly recommend the Exit Monday article that they have for this. And last but not least, I have on this tier Ragnarok, because this is a complete joke entry, and I thought that it would liven up this part of the iceberg, because it's a little bit depressing, end of the world and all that. So I decided to put Ragnarok here as a joke entry. But Ragnarok is the end of the world for Norse mythology. And yes, I do think it is a mythology. There are a lot of people on Twitter that will LARP as pagans and will tell you that Thor and Loki are actual entities, but I don't think so. So basically what happens in Ragnarok, basically the battle for the end of the world happens, and Jormungand during the battle eats the world. There's a lot more to it, obviously. I don't want to disrespect the culture by saying that, but it is something that isn't really conducive to a small spot in a overview. So, but yeah, that is this layer of the iceberg. And here we are at the very, very last layer, the 8th. We are below the depths at this point. We have gone so far down that we are now transcended above. First, on this layer, I have the world never ends. So, what if the world just astronomically never ends? It seems pretty improbable, right? But what if we extend something like quantum immortality into the equation? The idea that throughout the branching paths of the many worlds interpretation of how timelines work, there is always there's a single timeline that the world never ends for any reason. Because again, decision trees. Think of it like a video game, kind of, one way or the other. The rapture happens, it doesn't happen. Nukes happen, they don't happen. Yellowstone happens, it doesn't happen. Going down the iceberg. Well, what if we reach the theoretical last possible way the world could end, and it doesn't? What if we live in that quantum timeline right now? Now that would be interesting. The simulation gets turned off. Now, I like the Exit Monday article about this, because it goes into pretty deep about how the many ways in which the world seems artificial. But basically, we live in the Matrix, and the simulation gets turned off. Or for some reason, it's decided that the world's experiment that we are a part of is over. Like, whatever creature is watching us decides that it knows enough and can turn off the simulation now, and that's just it. Now, to some people, that's very terrifying. For me, I doubt it. I'm very confident that this is reality. I think that theorizing that we live in a simulation is conducive to giving up on morality, because if nothing is real, then what's the for example, what's the point? It's such a dirty nihilism, in my opinion, but that's just me. Aliens Glass Us is a how I describe alien invasion, kind of just killing us off. Like, the Covenant comes and they glass our planet like it's Halo. Since we haven't discovered any extraterrestrial life yet, this is something that seems very unlikely, and we might be the ones doing the glassing, if at all, in the future, going to other planets and taking the stuff from them if we progress to that point. There are theories like the Great Filter for why we don't see any other life, and the idea that life would be immediately hostile to us going somewhere else is sort of human-centric, I think, but you never know. Maybe we will get taken out by aliens. And last but not least, the most horrifying thing on this iceberg: YouTube demonetizes the American economy. This is a joke entry. Please don't take it seriously. I wanted to just leave off on something very funny while I ask you to like and subscribe. But if you enjoyed this video, or if you want me to go into more detail on another part of this video, I would gladly talk at length about any of these topics. They're all very interesting. That's why I put them on the iceberg. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you watched to the even if you skipped to the end just to hear me say goodbye, that's fine. If you fell asleep to this video and I just woke you up, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Thank you so much. More videos to come. Have a good one. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Don't get the coof. Goodbye.